In the heart of an ancient woodland, subtle rays of golden sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, dappling the forest floor with soft pools of light. Towering conifers and thick clusters of hazelnut trees seemed to bask in the warmth, their branches swaying ever so slightly in the summer breeze. Gentle tendrils of smoke lazily rose from the remnants of a forgotten campfire, twisting towards the sky before dissipating into the vast green roof above. Ash danced in the air, carried by the wind. Among the embers, a charred teapot lay abandoned, a silent relic of the day's earlier activities. The forest hummed with life, yet a distinct stillness pervaded, broken only by the sounds of our preparations. Hammers clanged, saws buzzed, and feet scurried across the clearing as we worked with haste. Urgent voices overlapped, creating a chaotic symphony of noise. We were a ragtag group of about 12, living in a makeshift camp hidden deep in the woods. Our homes were crude shacks, constructed from branches, wooden pallets, and tarpaulins scattered around a communal area where a fire pit marked the center of our world. An outdoor kitchen, messy but functional, was our lifeline. The camp had been our refuge for months, a place where time slowed, and the outside world felt a million miles away. Today, however, we had double the usual number of people as we prepared for a grand event that would soon shake the forest. A makeshift bar had been erected between two sturdy tree trunks, little more than a plank nailed in place, covered with canvas and lined with shelves stocked with cheap beer. The centerpiece, however, was the stage, strung with fairy lights and equipped with a rudimentary sound system powered by car batteries. The stage sat on an old pull cart with off-road tires. The anticipation was palpable. As the long summer day edged towards night, more people arrived, weaving through the trees towards the clearing. The party was about to begin. As midnight approached, the first notes of music echoed through the trees. Throbbing bass lines intertwined with playful melodies, creating a pulsating rhythm that seemed to vibrate through the earth itself. The air grew thick with excitement, and as darkness fully descended, the party kicked into high gear. Lights flickered, bodies swayed, and the forest became a living, breathing entity. Among the attendees were a diverse group of souls. Oslo's Psytrance community had come in full force, their colorful attire and carefree attitudes blending seamlessly with the surroundings. Joining them were a small contingent of Czech travelers who had been camping on a nearby island during their summer work stint in Norway. 2 individuals from this group, however, would soon leave their mark on the night in unexpected ways. The first was a Czech girl. No one noticed when she disappeared from the party, her absence slipping under the radar amid the chaos. It wasn't until hours later, when a call from the local police station came through, that we realized she had been arrested, found wandering naked along the provincial road, miles away from the party. The forest, it seemed, had played tricks on her mind. The second was her friend, a towering, broad-shouldered man named Marek. Marek was a gentle giant in his calmer moments, but tonight was different. He was tripping hard mushrooms, acid, anything he could get his hands on. At first, his wild antics were harmless, but soon they escalated. His massive frame became a wrecking ball, crashing through the crowd, knocking over people, and flattening anything in his path. His shouts were incomprehensible, his actions unpredictable. Injuries followed in his wake, and the situation quickly became untenable. A few of us tried to calm him, but Marek was too far gone. His movements were erratic, his mind lost to the substances coursing through his veins. Finally, we made the difficult decision to subdue him. A group of us tackled him to the ground, and for a while he thrashed and fought, his screams echoing through the night. Some suggested we tie him to a tree and gag him, but others, myself included, were against it. We didn't want to risk pushing him deeper into a dark mental space. Suddenly, his body went limp. Marek stopped struggling, stopped moving. His wide-open eyes stared unblinkingly at the sky, fixed on some unseen point beyond the treetops. The only sound he made was a steady stream of air escaping his lips as he muttered two words over and over: Svetlo. Zivit, light. Life. We hovered around him, unsure of what to do. His limbs were still, his gaze distant, but he seemed calm. His cries for light and life echoed faintly, even as the music blared on. He wasn't a threat anymore, at least not physically, so we decided to leave him be. As long as he wasn't screaming about darkness or death, we figured he'd be okay. The night wore on, and eventually his voice grew softer, blending into the background noise of the forest. The party continued, but Merrick was forgotten. By sunrise, the batteries powering the speakers had died, and the music ceased. People began to disperse, returning to their tents or wandering off into the early morning mist. Only a handful of us remained, huddled around the bar, sipping coffee as the forest stirred awake. Merrick lay where we had left him, covered in blankets, his breath slow and steady. The mist hung low to the ground, creating an ethereal atmosphere. His eyes, bloodshot and hollow, still stared blankly into the distance. His lips twitched, barely perceptible, and if you listened closely, you could still hear the faint murmur of Svetlo. Zivut. Hours passed, and we forgot about him entirely until the rustle of leaves drew our attention. We turned as one, watching in silence as Merrick slowly pushed the blankets aside and rose to his feet. He was a giant emerging from slumber, his massive frame casting long shadows in the dim morning light. He stretched, blinked at the world around him, and then, with heavy steps, made his way towards us. He stopped under the kitchen canopy, his expression bewildered. For a long moment, no one spoke. We just stared at him, waiting. Finally, I broke the silence. "How's it going?" I asked. Merrick's face lit up with sudden clarity, his eyes bright with a strange kind of joy. "I was happy," he said, his voice filled with wonder. And with that, the remnants of the party carried on, the memory of the night forever etched into the forest, just as Merrick's words lingered in the airlight and life. The morning light was now breaking through the thick fog, illuminating the forest with a soft, silver glow. The air was still damp with dew, and the faint hum of nature waking up filled the silence left by the dead batteries and quiet speakers. The remnants of the party lingered like echoes in the trees, but the clearing felt different now, hushed, reflective, as if the land itself was trying to process what had unfolded through the night. Merrick stood motionless for a few moments longer, his large frame silhouetted against the rising sun, his expression still a mixture of confusion and quiet revelation. His words, "I was happy," hung in the air like a strange, profound declaration, spoken from a place beyond mere intoxication. It was as though he had touched some hidden truth during his wild trip, something that even he couldn't fully grasp but had left a mark on his soul. The rest of us exchanged glances. No one quite knew what to say or do. The chaos of the night had been exhausting, and now we were left with the debris of both the party and the madness. The forest, usually a place of comfort and refuge, seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the next move. Merrick finally sat down at the bar, rubbing his eyes as though waking from a long, disorienting dream. Someone handed him a cup of coffee, and he took it with shaky hands. We watched him in silence, unsure of whether to ask about his ordeal or to let him process it on his own. I saw things he muttered after a few sips, his voice gravelly. He didn't look at any of us, his gaze still fixed on some invisible horizon. Things I can't explain. It was like I left my body. I wasn't Merrick anymore. We waited, unsure if he would say more. His words, though cryptic, resonated deeply. Psytrance parties always had an air of the mystical about them, but this was different. Merrick hadn't just gotten lost in the music or the drugs, he had ventured somewhere none of us had been. He had crossed a threshold. I saw light, he continued, voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't just light like the sun or a lamp. It was everything, life itself. I was part of it, and it was part of me. His words sent a chill down my spine. There was something almost religious in his tone, as though he had witnessed a revelation that transcended human understanding. I glanced at the others around the bar. Some looked skeptical, but most wore expressions of quiet intrigue. Merrick wasn't the type for fanciful speech if he was saying this. It had to have been real to him, at least in some way. Was it scary? One of our group, Luca, asked cautiously. His voice broke the stillness, and it felt like a question we all needed answered. Merrick shook his head slowly, a soft smile creeping across his face. No, not at all. It was peaceful. Like being embraced by something huge, something that just knows, you know. We didn't know, not really. But we nodded anyway. The forest, the night, the music, all of it had conspired to bring Merrick to this moment, this strange, quiet epiphany. It didn't matter if we understood it or not. I couldn't move, Merrick said after a long pause, his voice a little stronger now, as though the memory was becoming clearer. I was trapped in that feeling. But it wasn't bad. It was like being held still so I could see something important. And all I could think was light and life. That's what I kept saying. Svetlo. Zivit. I didn't even know why. He trailed off again, eyes distant. The rest of us shifted in our seats, processing his words. There was a strange power in the simplicity of his experience. Light and life. Two of the most basic, yet profound forces in the universe. The conversation drifted into silence once more, as we all sipped our coffee, the forest around us growing brighter with the morning. Birds began to chirp in the treetops, and the haze lifted, revealing the scattered remains of the party, empty bottles, trampled grass, and the faintest echo of the bass line that had once reverberated through the ground. After a while, someone suggested we clean up the camp. Merrick stood up with us, moving slowly, still clearly affected by whatever had happened to him. He wasn't the wild, hulking figure of the night before. Now he was subdued, introspective, his movements careful, as though he was still adjusting to being back in the real world. As we worked, the conversation ebbed and flowed around the camp, but Merrick's words stayed with us. Even those who didn't believe in the spiritual or metaphysical couldn't deny that something had changed in him. He was no longer the chaotic force that had rampaged through the night. He was quieter now, more thoughtful. It was as if the forest had shown him a part of itself, something ancient and sacred, and he had emerged changed. When the clearing was tidied, and the remnants of the party had been packed away, we sat together one last time before dispersing. The sun was high in the sky now, burning through the last of the morning fog. The air smelled fresh, alive with the scent of pine and earth. Merrick stood up to leave, his massive form casting long shadows on the forest floor. He paused at the edge of the clearing, looking back at us with a faint smile. "Thanks for not tying me to a tree," he said, his voice light with humor, but there was sincerity in his eyes. "I don't think I would have made it through if you had." We chuckled, but the gravity of his words lingered. Merrick waved and disappeared into the trees, leaving behind only the memory of his strange, haunting journey through light and life. As we packed our things and prepared to leave the forest behind, I couldn't help but feel that something profound had brushed up against us that night. Maybe it was the wild energy of the party, maybe it was the drugs, or maybe it was the forest itself alive in ways we couldn't fully comprehend. Whatever it was, it had touched Merrick, and through him, a little part of it had touched us too. And as I walked away from the clearing, the sound of the wind through the trees felt different, like a whisper from the forest itself. Svetlo. Zivot. As we made our way out of the forest, the sun higher now, casting longer shadows beneath the towering conifers, there was an undeniable sense that we were leaving behind more than just a clearing. The forest had witnessed something profound that night, a subtle shift in the air that only those who had experienced it could feel. The quiet hum of nature, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, it all felt like a gentle reminder of the mysteries we'd glimpsed, but didn't fully understand. Luca, walking beside me, finally broke the silence. "Do you think he'll be okay? Merrick, I mean." I nodded slowly, unsure of the real answer, but feeling that somehow he would be. "Yeah. I think he found something out there. Or maybe it found him." The path narrowed, the trees growing denser as we approached the edge of the woods. Behind us, the clearing was already becoming a distant memory, swallowed by the wilderness. But Merrick's words stayed with me, echoing in my mind with every step. Light and life. Simple, yet powerful. And as I glanced back one last time, I realized the forest, quiet, ancient, and vast, would always hold those secrets, waiting for the next soul brave enough to listen.